On a cold night, a girl named Susan is dragged out into a shed by her father because he can't stand looking at her. He wishes Susan had never been born and plans to leave her out here all night. However, a few minutes later, her brother Jinta comes out and tries to free her. He is shocked to discover that she's not there. He frantically runs around the village looking for Susan and eventually finds her as she's crossing a bridge to leave the village. He rushes over to her and apologizes for not being able to protect her from their father's abuse, as he will only get in trouble if he tries to protect her. Susan was born with a demon eye, and since this is feudal Japan, she has been labeled a cursed child and treated like a worthless pest. She knows there's no way she can live a normal life with an eye like this, so she tells Jinta to just go home without her. Jinta stands there for a moment, contemplating his next move, and eventually decides that he loves his sister more than the rest of the family. He takes her hand and asks her to run away with him. Together they flee their old home, but it's still raining, so it's starting to get really cold. They have nowhere to go for shelter, so Jinta takes Susan to the remains of an old building. The two huddles together to try to conserve body heat. Susan has already fallen asleep, and Jinta is about to pass out as well. But before he does, he notices a man approaching them, and he says something about taking them in. By the time Jinta wakes up, he finds himself being carried by the man, with Susan walking alongside him. The man is relieved to see that Jinta is finally awake, so he sets him down, and they continue walking until they get to the man's village. The village is mostly inhabited by blacksmiths who specialize in forging katana, so everyone is hard at work. The man leads Jinta and Susan to his house, and as soon as he opens the door, his daughter runs out to greet him. She's happy to see him but curious about the two kids standing behind him. The man tells her that Jinta and Susan will be living with them from now on. He asks his daughter if she's okay with that, and she seems thrilled by the idea, as that means she'll have friends to play with. She walks up to Jinta to introduce herself as Shirayuki and hopes all three of them can get along from now on. That night, Jinta is having trouble falling asleep, so Motoharu asks him if something is wrong. Motoharu is currently cleaning his sword, so Jinta asks him if he's a samurai, but Motoharu says he is actually a sentinel. His job is to keep important people and places safe. Later, Jinta and Susan join Shirayuki and Chitose by the river. On the way home, Jinta asks about Shirayuki's mother, Yokeis, who helped him and Susan stay in the village. Shirayuki explains that Yokeis is an Itsukiheim, a fire god's maiden, and can only be seen by the village chief and her husband, Motoharu, her sentinel. The next day, Jinta trains with Motoharu, but as a novice in sword fighting, he's easily knocked to the ground without Motoharu breaking a sweat. Motoharu tells Jinta that he still has a long way to go, but if he keeps practicing, he will surely become a master someday. Years go by, and Jinta has become the new sentinel of the Shrine Maiden. He is attending a meeting between all the village officials and the Shrine Maiden. She is hidden behind a curtain so no one can see her directly, and as the meeting begins, she commends Jinta for his excellent demon-slaying abilities. He tells her he is just doing his job by keeping the village safe, and the most recent demon he encountered tried using a human form to sneak into the village. One of the officials starts getting nervous when Jinta says this, and the others ask if he has any idea why a demon would want to sneak into the village. One official suggests that the demon may be after the Shrine Maiden because legend has it that if a demon eats the liver of a Shrine Maiden, it will become immortal. However, it might also be after the sacred Yurai sword. It has been passed down by the Shrine Maidens for generations and is quite important, so it would make sense for the demons to be after it. One of the officials mentions that the Yurai sword was created by one of the best blacksmiths known to man, and it is said to have mystical powers imbued within it. If the demons are truly after the Yurai blade, it could spell trouble for the entire village, so the chief tells everyone to remain vigilant. But Kayomasa says there's nothing to worry about because both he and Jinta are in charge of guarding the Shrine Maiden. However, he personally thinks Jinta isn't qualified for the job. Jinta and Kayomasa are about to start arguing, but the chief and the Shrine Maiden tell them to quiet down. The meeting is now over, so everyone leaves the shrine except Jinta, because it's his job to guard the Shrine Maiden. Now that they are alone, the Shrine Maiden comes out of her room, and it turns out to be Shirayuki. Jinta asks her what she's doing because a Shrine Maiden shouldn't allow herself to be seen so carelessly, but she and Jinta have been best friends for ages, so she sees no need for formalities. She tells him that Susan is here too, but the shrine is supposed to be off limits to regular people, so she really shouldn't be here. Susan doesn't look like she's grown up at all in the past few years, and when Jinta and Shirayuki wake her up, she's elated to see her big brother again. Jinta has been so busy with demon slaying that he barely ever gets to see her. While he's happy to see her too, he scolds Susan for coming here since the shrine is off limits. She doesn't understand why she can't visit Shirayuki, but Jinta gets to see her whenever he wants. But rules are rules, so Jinta tells her to go back to their house. After Susan leaves, the chief soon returns to the shrine, and he has something important to discuss with Shirayuki. He asks Jinta to give them some privacy. Jinta initially refuses because it is his duty as Shirayuki's sentinel to be by her side at all times, but Shirayuki tells him he can take the day off. Jinta eventually relents and heads home for the day. Meanwhile, outside the village, two demons have set their sights on Susan because of her demon eye. That evening, Shiroyuki sneaks out of the shrine and meets up with Jinta because she has something important to tell him. When the chief came to speak with her earlier, he told her that she should focus on producing an heir to replace her in case she ends up being killed by the demons. It sounds morbid, but the chief is right, so Shiroyuki needs to get married soon. It was decided that she will marry Kayomasa, mostly because he is the son of the chief and will eventually become the new chief of the village. Jinta isn't sure how he should feel about the news, and Shiroyuki isn't happy about it either. She admits that she is in love with Jinta, and honestly, she snuck out here fully intending to ask Jinta to run away with her and start a new life. But she knows he would never agree to that. Jinta took an oath to protect this village, and trained for years to become strong enough to defend it, and Shiroyuki took the same oath when she became the village's shrine maiden. So if they were to run away now, it would be an insult to everything they have worked for. More time passes, and Jinta is once again called into a meeting where he is informed of a demon sighting out in the forest. He is tasked with slaying the demon, so he prepares to head out immediately. However, before he leaves, Kayomasa stops him. He knows Jinta must have heard the news about Shiroyuki getting married to him, so he doesn't understand why Jinta is acting like he's not upset. Jinta tells him there's nothing to be upset about because the only things that matter to him are the safety of his shrine maiden and the village. The crazy thing about this is that Kayomasa isn't even trying to gloat about marrying Shiroyuki. He knows Jinta is in love with Shiroyuki and she is in love with Jinta, so it just feels messed up for him to marry her. But Jinta has already made his decision, so he leaves the village to complete his mission. Once he makes it out into the forest, Jinta is suddenly attacked by the bulky demon. Before the fight begins, he asks the demon if it's alone, because the report said there were 2 demons out here. The bulky demon explains that his partner had some business to attend to in the village. That doesn't sound good, but Jinta has to deal with this guy first before he can head back to deal with the second demon. He dashes forward, and with a heavy swing, he's able to sever one of the demon's arms, but the demon keeps attacking, so he's forced to back away. The demon picks up its severed hand and isn't even upset about losing it. He is just impressed that Jinta was skilled enough to cut it off. Meanwhile, in the village, Susan is confronted by the demon and is absolutely terrified. The demon tells Susan that there's no need to be so frightened because Susan is a demon just like her, but Susan refuses to believe it. The demon takes one look at Susan and realizes that her love for Jinta must be keeping her from becoming a full demon, and she finds it quite oppressive because Jinta must have showered Susan with constant love and affection to make her such a good person. Susan loves Jinta with all her heart, so hearing the demon praise Jinta puts her at ease. Now that Susan is no longer scared of her, the demon tries to convince Susan to use her powers to help her. She even promises that she won't hurt Susan in any way, and everyone knows demons can't lie, so she says Susan can trust her. However, Susan rejects her offer because there's a chance that the demons might hurt Jinta. The demon girl can't deny that, so she tries using a different method to convince Susan and shows her a vision. The vision shows Shiroyuki undressing and getting ready to take back shots in the shrine. Seeing this makes Susan sick, but because it wasn't Jinta giving them to her, she asks the demon if what she saw was real. The demon explains that her ability allows her to see into the future. She can also share visions of the future with others as well, which is what Susan just saw. If Susan still doesn't believe her, she's willing to take her to the shrine right now so she can see it in person. Meanwhile, Jinta is still fighting the bulky demon, but before the fight continues, he wants to know why demons attack humans in the first place. The demon explains that it is simply its purpose in life. Demons don't necessarily have to kill humans, but every demon has an intended purpose they must fulfill, and right now, the bulky demon's purpose is to stall Jinta. Bulk has the power of assimilation, so he can acquire the abilities of other demons by eating them, even allowing him to alter his body at will. Jinta can't afford to hesitate here, so he charges forward in an attempt to kill Bulk once and for all. However, he immediately gets his arm punched off, and when he tries to slash Bulk's neck, Bulk shatters it with his teeth. By all accounts, Jinta should be a dead man, but at the last second, he reaches back and grabs a piece of his shattered sword. He then plunges the fragment deep into Bulk's heart before Bulk can retaliate, and Jinta emerges victorious. Bulk accepts his defeat, and he is actually quite happy because this means he has fulfilled his purpose. He explains that the other demon he came with has the power of foresight and has used it to look far into the future, 170 years to be exact. According to her vision, the strongest demon of all time lives here, which is why they came in the first place. As soon as Bulk mentions a demon living in the village, Jinta realizes he must be talking about Susan, but before he can react, Bulk says he's going to give Jinta a gift to congratulate him on his victory. A second later, Bulk's severed arm grabs Jinta's head and begins squeezing him until he passes out. Meanwhile, over in the shrine, Kayomasa is on top of Shiroyuki. All he needs to do is make a child with her, so he is hoping to get it over with once and for all. Since Jinta is away on a mission, this is the perfect time. Otherwise, Kayomasa would have to sit outside and listen to the sound of Shiroyuki getting pile-driven, and Kayomasa feels bad enough about this already. However, before anything could happen, the demon girl tears through the curtains to show Susan what's going on, and she's absolutely devastated. At the same time, Jinta wakes up in the forest, and for some reason, his missing arm has been restored. He doesn't have time to worry about that because Susan might be in trouble, so he starts running back to the village. Meanwhile, Susan is still trying to understand what she just witnessed. It was unbearable to see Jinta in love with Shirayuki, but Susan was willing to put up with it if Jinta got to be happy. She even stopped herself from growing up so she wouldn't get in the way of Jinta and Shirayuki's relationship. But now she finds out that Shirayuki is marrying a different guy. This was the final straw, so Susan snaps and becomes unhinged. She is so frustrated that Shirayuki would betray Jinta's love, and after a few suggestive words from the demon girl, Susan decides to kill her. Her demon power suddenly awakens, and the whole room is filled with black smoke as Susan takes an adult form. Kayomasa takes the legendary sword and tries to attack Susan, but the demon girl knocks him out before he can do anything. She then takes Kayomasa's body outside because she has something she wants to do, leaving Shirayuki alone with Susan. Jinta soon arrives at the shrine, and Shirayuki is still alive, so she runs into his arms. But a second later, her head is cut off by Susan. Jinta is frozen in shock by what just happened, and a moment later, Susan appears behind him holding Shirayuki's head. Jinta asks Susan why she would do such a thing, so Susan starts explaining the whole thing about Shirayuki marrying another man. But he already knew about it, and even if he didn't, it doesn't give her the right to kill Shirayuki. Jinta realizes that the Susan he cared for is long gone, and with Shirayuki dead, he has nothing left except hatred. The demon arm begins to integrate with the rest of his body, transforming Jinta. Now, he is looking at Susan with pure disdain. She doesn't understand why he looks like he hates her so much when all she was trying to do is make him happy. She takes this to mean that Jinta is going to abandon her just like everyone else, so she decides to just kill him. However, as she stabs Jinta in the stomach, she realizes it did almost no damage, and Jinta proceeds to punch a hole straight through her body. Susan manages to survive the punch, so Jinta tries to finish her off, but at the last second, the demon girl jumps in and sacrifices herself to save Susan. She tells Susan to get out of here while she has the chance, so she starts walking away. But before she leaves, Susan tells Jinta that she has nothing left in this world, so no matter how many years it takes, she's going to make sure she destroys everything, and on the final day, she will be back to kill him for betraying her. By the 1850s, Jinta, now known as Jinya, had built up an excellent reputation as a demon hunter, so one day, he is summoned by a wealthy man for a special mission. The man introduces Jinya to his assistant Zenji, and tells him he can ask Zenji for any extra details about the job. He then gets up and leaves the room, so Zenji greets Jinya and asks him how much he already knows. The man already told Jinya about his beloved daughter Natsu and how he wants Jinya to protect her from a demon that has appeared lately. But there's a little more to the story than that. Basically, Jinya is going to be working as Natsu's bodyguard because ever since she turned 13, she says she has been hearing a demon outside her room. The demon would constantly say things like, "Return my daughter to me," so Natsu is terrified that the demon might kidnap her. Speaking of Natsu, she suddenly comes storming into the room looking for Zenji. She notices Jinya sitting there and assumes he must be the bodyguard that her father said he would hire. But when Jinya tries to himself, she cuts him off. She doesn't want anything to do with him, and tells him to leave immediately because he is obviously some kind of scam artist who only claims to be a demon slayer. Zenji tries to convince her that Jinya is a genuine demon slayer because her father went to great lengths to find him. But Natsu refuses to listen and demands that Zenji kick Jinya out. Later that night, Natsu is sitting up in her bed because she is still scared that the demon will return, so Zenji shows up and sits outside her door to calm her nerves. Having Jinya probably would have been better, but since Natsu chased him away, Zenji is going to have to act as her bodyguard instead. He is not sure how useful he would be in a fight against the demon, but if it will make her feel better, he promises to stand guard until morning so she can get some sleep. Natsu is glad that Zenji came to protect her, but he still doubts that a demon will show up at all. Natsu is disappointed to hear that Zenji doesn't fully believe her, and it was the same with her father because why else would he hire a shady samurai to slay a demon? Zenji can't be sure that Natsu's father believes that demons exist, but he can guarantee that her father is taking this seriously. He cares about Natsu's well-being wholeheartedly, even though she is not biologically related to him. Just then, Natsu hears the demon's voice again, and it sends shivers down her spine. She begs Zenji to help her, but he is just as scared as she is once he sees the demon. He tells Natsu to stay inside her room while he handles this, but he has no idea how he is going to defeat this thing. Just before the demon could get its hands on Zenji, his arm is suddenly cut off by Jinya. Jinya asks the demon to identify itself at first, but when it doesn't respond, he decides to just cut it in half with one swing of his sword. The demon falls to the floor and disintegrates into black smoke, so Zenji and Natsu are safe for now. Natsu recognizes Jinya as the samurai she kicked out earlier today, so he turns around and asks her if she still thinks he is a scam artist. Natsu asks him if the demon is dead, but killing it isn't going to be that easy. In Jinya's experience, demons are only truly dead once they turn into white mist, so since this one turned into black mist, it will definitely be back. The next morning, Zenji formally thanks Jinya for saving them last night, and since the demon is going to come back, he asks Jinya to stick around for another night. Jinya says he'd be happy to help, but he has a few questions he would like to ask about Natsu. He has been curious ever since he heard the demon say, "Return my daughter to me," so he wants to know if there is a story behind it. Zenji explains that Natsu's real parents are part of the boss extended family, but they passed away a while ago, so the boss took Natsu in and raised her as his own. And in case Jinya is worried, Zenji assured him that there is no way that Natsu is a demon child, because if she were, there is no way the boss would have even considered adopting her. The boss' wife was killed by demons, and following that, his son ran away and hasn't been seen since. The boss blames the loss of his family on the demons, so he hates all demons with every fiber of his being. Later that evening, Natsu is having dinner with her father, and he asks her if everything has been going alright with her new bodyguard. At first, she was a little skeptical of Jinya, but after seeing him in action, she's sure that he's the real deal, although Natsu is curious why her father chose to hire Jinya specifically. He tells her that there have been rumors of demons prowling around Edo recently, but at the same time, there are also rumors of a man who can slay any demon with a single slash as long as he gets paid for it. Natsu's father has personally verified the rumors, so he knew there would be no better person to hire as Natsu's bodyguard. Natsu is glad to learn that her father was really taking her seriously when she told him about the demon, because his love is all she cares about. Natsu has been very happy ever since he adopted her, but at the same time, she's been constantly tormented by all the hateful gossip people spread about her. Later that night, Zenji and Jinya are sitting outside Natsu's room as planned, when all of a sudden, she comes out and asks Jinya to tell her his name because she didn't let him introduce himself before. Natsu's father seems to think highly of him, so she has decided that she is going to put her faith in him as well. Jinya can tell that Natsu is quite fond of her adoptive father, Juozu, but that's normal because he took her in and gave her a place to stay, so she is very grateful to him. While they are on the topic, Jinya asks her about a rumor he heard involving Juozu's lost son, but as soon as he brings that up, Natsu yells that she doesn't know anything about it. This is clearly a sensitive topic for her, so Jinya decides to let it go for now so he doesn't upset her. Natsu then asks Jinya if it is possible for a human and a demon to have a baby together, and Jinya answers yes, so Natsu starts thinking that she might really be the daughter of that demon that keeps attacking. But Jinya assures her that she is not related to that demon in any way. Natsu asks Jinya how he could possibly be so sure, so he explains that he has a bit of history with this demon, so he knows it can't be Natsu's mother. There are various ways that a demon can be born in this world. It can come from two demon parents, a demon and a human, or in rare cases, a demon can spawn from nothing. Demons like this come from the essence of strong emotions, especially negative ones, and when those negative feelings accumulate within people, they can sometimes take the form of a demon such as this one. Natsu starts freaking out after seeing the demon again, so Jinya casually walks up to it and starts asking it to state its name. The demon doesn't seem intelligent enough to understand what Jinya is saying. As it lunges at him, Jinya smacks it across the face and pins it to the ground. Zenji urges Jinya to hurry up and kill the demon already, but Jinya replies that if he does, it will just keep coming back. Natsu asks him why, so Jinya explains that it was her emotions that gave birth to this demon. The demon appeared in response to Natsu's belief that causing a fuss would make her father focus his attention on her. Natsu initially refuses to believe it, but everything Jinya is saying makes perfect sense. She wanted something to make her father treat her like a real daughter, and all of a sudden, a monster appeared to make that happen. Jinya tells her that the only way this demon will ever go away is if she regains control over her feelings. But Natsu doesn't know how she's supposed to do that. Jinya tells her that all she needs to do is come to terms with the way she feels and earnestly asked him to slay the demon. Natsu thinks for a moment and realizes all she ever wanted was to be loved by Juzo as his daughter, but she didn't think he cared about her that way. That's why she ended up believing that if she were attacked by a demon, that maybe he would start loving her more, and now those ugly emotions have manifested in front of her, so in a sense, that demon is her. However, Zenji tells her not to think like that. That demon may have been born from her feelings, but that's not what matters right now. Zenji knows that Juzo loves Natsu more than anything in the world, and Natsu loves him just as much, but neither of them is good at expressing it. She'll need to address her feelings more honestly from now on, but Zenji swears that he will be by her side to help her through it. This gives Natsu the confidence to finally let go of the doubt and self-loathing that spawned the demon, so she tells Jinya to kill it once and for all. And as soon as Jinya hears those words, he pulls out his sword and slashes the demon in half. This time, the demon's body fades into a white mist, so Jinya is certain that it isn't going to come back anymore. However, later on in the night after Natsu has gone back to bed, the demon's body begins to rematerialize. Jinya expected something like this to happen because if the demon was truly formed from only Natsu's negative emotions, then it would have ceased existing as soon as she made the decision to let go of them. That means the emotions of someone else were mixed into this demon, and as far as Jinya knows, there's only one other person in this region who had the potential to be a demon, and that was Juozu's dead wife. With Natsu's negative emotions gone, the demon is to keep its shape, but the daughter it keeps calling out for isn't Natsu, it's Suzun. That means Jinya is Juozu's missing son, and this demon is his and Suzun's mother. To be perfectly honest, Jinya has no clear memories of what his mother was like when she was still alive, But he is sad that things ended up this way, and all he can do now is put an end to his mother's suffering so she can finally move on. The next morning, Jinya is set to leave, so Zenji and Natsu come out to thank him again for all his help. Jinya tells them there's no need to thank him because he already got his reward, and besides, this is his way of making amends. Natsu doesn't understand what he means, so Jinya explains that getting older has allowed him to reflect on his actions in the past. While he believed he was doing the right thing by running away with Susan back then, he never stopped to consider how his actions would affect his father or the world for that matter. Natsu still doesn't understand what he's talking about, so Jinya just tells her to appreciate the kindness that her father shows her. He then starts walking away, and a few moments later, Juizu comes out. Zenji asks why Juizu didn't come out to thank Jinya as well, but he didn't see a reason to, because he knew from the moment that Jinya arrived that he would be able to get the job done. Zenji wonders why Juizu would have so much faith in a random demon slayer, but Juizu says it's perfectly normal for a parent to have faith in their child. The others still haven't figured out that Jinya is Juizu's son, and Juizu doesn't intend to explain it to them, so he tells Zenji to get back to work already, or he's going to be demoted. Zenji doesn't want that, so he leaves to go do his job, and Juizu starts leaving as well, but before he does, Natsu has something she wants to say. She asks him if there's anything she can do to help out, but Juizu is curious as to why she would ask. She explains that Jinya told her she should repay Juizu for his kindness, and Juizu is happy to know that Jinya still thinks of him as a good person, but he tells Natsu that she doesn't need to worry about repaying him because the best way a child could ever make their parent happy is by living a long and happy life. The story then jumps forward to the year 1853, where we find Jinya calmly waiting for his soba at a quiet little noodle shop. The owner's daughter brings over his bowl with careful hands and her father smiles, clearly proud that she's finally getting the hang of serving customers. The shop owner strikes up a conversation, mentioning that there's been disturbing talk lately, rumors about a serial killer haunting the streets. With a worried glance at his daughter, he admits it's starting to make him nervous. He sighs and says he wishes the emperor would pull himself together already, but Jinya quickly tells him to watch his mouth. The owner agrees, laughing awkwardly. Last thing he wants is for his shop to be burned down barely 10 days after opening. He admits he actually got this place for cheap after buying it from the previous owner, but now he's wondering why Jinya's been showing up for so little 5 days in a row, considering how empty the place always is. His daughter warns him that he's probably going to scare off the one customer they do have, but the owner waves it off, saying they're just small talk. Then he turns to Jinya and asks how the soba tastes. Jinya gives it a straight answer. It's not bad, just plain. The owner chuckles and admits that he doesn't have much talent for cooking. He only makes soba because he loves it. Jinya can't help but ask why he even opened a shop, and the man simply says he had his reasons. After finishing his meal, Jinya pays the bill, and the owner casually notes that he seems to be doing alright financially for a ronin. Jinya shrugs and says he earns his money by slaying demons. The owner laughs, thinking Jinya is joking, but Jinya just heads for the door without another word. Before he can leave, the owner stops him and brings up something strange. According to the rumors, this so-called slasher doesn't use a sword. Everybody they've found so far has been torn to shreds, completely mangled. What's worse is the numbers don't line up. More people have gone missing than bodies recovered, so folks are starting to believe it's not a human doing this. They're saying it has to be demons. Jinya asks what these incidents usually happen, and the owner tells him the sightings have been around the Itobashi area. As Jinya steps out, the daughter calls out to him, asking him to be careful, but he simply replies that he's not a kid. That night, Jinya positions himself by a bridge, waiting in the shadows for the demon to show up. Hours go by, but there's no sign of anything unusual. Just as he's about to leave, a woman's scream echoes through the night, and without hesitation, Jinya bolts toward the sound. When Jinya arrives at the scene, he finds several mangled corpses sprawled across the ground, but no sign of the demon. He glances around, confused because he definitely heard a woman scream, but there's not a single woman in sight. As he begins scanning the area more closely, something invisible lashes out at him, but Jinya barely dodges in time. The invisible demon strikes again, and this time, Jinya manages to block the blow. But before he can retaliate, the demon vanishes and reappears behind him, landing a hit that cuts him. Annoyed now, Jinya morphs his arm into its transformed state, relieved that no one's around to witness this. The demon charges once more, but this time, Jinya counters, shattering his blade in the process. The creature tries to escape, but Jinya lands a deep slash before it can flee and calls it the Slasher. Hearing the name, the demon suddenly stops and becomes visible, revealing himself. Jinya narrows his eyes and demands a name, warning that if he doesn't get one, the next swing will be fatal. The demon finally introduces himself as Mosuk, so Jinya doesn't hesitate and moves in to finish him off, but Mosuk throws up his hands and says he doesn't want to fight. Jinya halts, confused because if he didn't want to fight, then why attack? Mosuk explains that he thought Jinya was the serial killer. He'd heard the same rumors about a demon behind the murders, so he followed a strong demonic scent and ran into Jinya. The moment Jinya called him the Slasher, he realized he'd made a mistake. Still confused, Jinya asks why a demon would be hunting down a killer in the first place. Mosuk replies that this isn't the place for a chat because someone might spot them here, so they should talk somewhere private. Cut to the two of them sitting inside Mosuk's home, where the demon now looks entirely human. Mosuk then explains that as demons get older, many choose to live quiet lives by blending into society. They don't exactly lie, but they do hide the truth, and Jinya knows that much already. Mosuk then pours them both some cheap liquor, and assures Jinya that it's not poisoned, but Jinya says that it wouldn't matter because poison wouldn't kill him anyway. As they drink, Mosuk explains that he's just a regular villager, scraping by in a dingy back alley house, but Jinya knows better. Mosuk is a demon, a rare kind capable of completely erasing his presence from the world, and Mosuk explains that his ability is called invisibility. He's one of the superior demons, the kind that's lived for over a century. Jinya's surprised because he expected someone that old to be a lot stronger. But Mosuk chuckles and explains that the title superior refers to their awakened abilities, not their raw strength. In fact, some superior demons like him are physically weaker and slower than even the average demon. Jinya gets the sense that Mosuk really isn't the killer, and Mosuk knows Jinya isn't either. Jinya decides to believe him, but something still doesn't sit right. If Mosuk thought he was the slasher, why did he go straight for the kill instead of confirming it first? Mosuk admits it was personal and asks Jinya if he's heard the rumors about the disappearances. Jinya says that he has, and he even confirmed it himself earlier when he heard a woman scream, but found no trace of her body. That's when Mosuk tells him the truth: the slasher only kills men on the spot, but women are abducted. Jinya asks how he can be so sure, so Mosuk clenches his fist and tells him that the demon took his wife. Her name was Hatsu, and she was a kind-hearted human, and she accepted him even though he was a demon. A month ago, she vanished without a trace. 10 days later, her body washed up by the Kanda River. The officer he spoke to said she'd been horribly violated before she died. Mosuk's voice shakes as he talks. Hatsu was a bright light, sweet, sociable, and the only one who ever looked at him with genuine love, and she didn't deserve what happened to her. Mosuk admits he's never cared much for humans, but he loved her with everything he had. Now, all he feels is rage, pure hatred for the thing that took her from him in such a vile, unforgivable way, and he swears that he'll get revenge, so he asks Jinya to step aside to leave the killer to him. But Jinya refuses, so Mosuk asks why, and Jinya simply tells him that it's his job to slay demons. Mosuk gets it, so in that case, they'll do this together. But when they find the slasher, he wants to be the one to finish it. That's when Jinya stops him and asks if revenge is really what he's chasing. Mosuk stares at him for a second, then asks if he doubts him. Jinya says no, it's not about doubt, but no matter who's behind this, human or demon, someone's life is going to be taken, so you need to be sure you're ready to carry that weight. Mosuk tells him demons don't lie, not even to ourselves, and that goes for how we feel too. And with that, Jinya agrees that they'll handle this together. The next night, we see the two of them scouting the city, gathering information about the slasher. They question everyone they can, but come up with nothing. It's frustrating, and they're not exactly thrilled about their lack of progress, but they know they'll have to keep pushing. Later on, the two of them are back at Mosuk's place sharing some sake, and Mosuk decides to ask Jinya a question that's been on his mind. Why does he hunt his own kind? Jinya says it's mostly for the money, and there's no shortage of humans who hate demons, and they're willing to pay a pretty sum to see them wiped out. Mosuk figures there's more to it than that though, because he doesn't see Jinya as the kind of guy who kills without reason, so he presses him about the real reason. Jinya leans back and says it's also about power because he's on a mission to stop a certain demon, and that surprises Mosuk because Jinya did say that he wants to stop it, not kill it. Jinya then tells him that he was born human, but after he watched a demon murder the woman he loved, something in him broke, and he turned into what he is now. That's why killing demons who threaten humans feels so natural to him. Mosuk is stunned because even after all that shit, Jinya still wants to spare the one who destroyed his life. Jinya says he won't know what to do until the day he finally faces that demon. Until then, he needs strength first. Mosuk admits it's a lot to unpack, but Jinya just says that he's being spineless. Then Jinya turns the question around. Once Mosuk gets his revenge, what's he planning to do? Mosuk goes quiet for a second, then says he never wanted any of this, and the only reason he tried living like a human was because he hates violence, and he never wanted to be hunted by humans. Also, he never wanted to fight other demons either because all he really wanted was a quiet life with the woman he loved. He says once this is over, he's going back into hiding. He'll tend to Hatsu's grave, and that will be the end of it. Jinya then remembers something Mosuk said earlier about him, that he's not the kind of person who does things without a good reason. That's not true because he is carrying a mindless hatred for his sister. The next day, we see Jinya back at the usual soba shop, quietly eating his lunch. The owner's daughter walks over and casually asks if he's had any luck tracking down the slasher, but he tells her that things aren't going so well. The owner then rumbles that making a living is damn near impossible these days. Jinya agrees, then nods toward the girl and says that with a cute waitress like Ofu, they should be packed by now. But maybe people in Edo were just too busy to notice, so the owner smiled, glad someone thought his daughter was beautiful. Jinya says with confidence that 8 out of 10 people would probably agree with him, and the owner grins, telling him he's got good taste. but Ofu quickly steps in and tells her father not to get ahead of himself. He reminds her loudly that she's never even had a relationship before, saying maybe this is a good chance for her. Embarrassed, Ofu cuts him off, asking him not to put Jinya on the spot. She tells him not to worry because she'll leave the nest when the time is right. But for now, she just wants a little more time to be his daughter. Her father quiets down, understanding what she means. She then turns to Jinya with an apologetic smile, and says sorry about all that, but Jinya doesn't mind one bit. In fact, he says she's lucky to have a father like that. She's proud of her old man, but it makes her wonder what Jinya's father was like. He explains that he has a younger sister, but their father never treated her right, said she didn't belong in the family and beat her for things she couldn't control. That's why Jinya took her and ran away from home, but it was a long time ago. She gently asks him if he hates his father for that, but Jinya says no and hits it now why his father acted the way he did. It doesn't make it right, but he understands. Later that night, Jinya is once again out patrolling with Mosuk, searching for any signs of the slasher, but the trail is cold and nothing so far. Mosuk mentions that there haven't been any news sightings recently, so there's no point in wandering around blind. Just then, he notices a figure standing by a tree, and it turns out to be Ofu. Jinya tells him she's the daughter of the soba shop he always visits, and Mosuk quietly notes that it's not safe for her to be out this late, so Jinya nods and starts walking toward her. She then looks up and asks what he was doing out there by himself, but then Jinya notices that Mosuk has already turned invisible again and tells him quietly to escort her just in case because if the slasher really is still lurking, it'd be bad if she ran into it alone. Jinya then asks Ofu what she's doing out here at this hour. She smiles and says she was just out admiring the cherry blossoms, but Jinya points out these aren't cherry blossoms, they're willows. She laughs a little and gently corrects him, saying that these are called snow willows. Technically, they aren't true willows, and they're not quite cherry blossoms either. They just resemble willows in how they hang, that they belong to the same family as cherries. So basically, it's not a cherry blossom and it's not a willow. It's a little bit of both and yet neither. Jinya looks at it for a moment and says it's a pitiful kind of plant, but Ofu disagrees and she thinks it's beautiful. Even if it doesn't perfectly fit into either category, it still blooms lovely flowers every year. She doesn't know what the plant feels exactly, but if it were really sad and empty, it wouldn't keep blooming the way it does. So no, it doesn't need his pity because it'll keep blooming every spring, no matter what people call it, and that's just how it lives. Jinya looked at the flower again and realized she was right. That really was its way of life. He then tells her if she should head back because her father's probably worried sick by now and she nods. As they walk together toward her house, Ofu casually tells him that he really ought to take more time to unwind. He wonders if he really comes off that tense, and she says he definitely gives off Brie vibes. He's always pushing himself too hard, and he admits that might be true. After all, he only lives for one thing, and that's the purpose he's meant to fulfill. She has no idea what this purpose even is, but she tells him he should ease up once in a while. Life's got to be dull if all he does is chase after some gold nonstop. Still in his mind, that's all he's got, and he tells her flat out that he can't take her advice, not even if he wanted to. A second later, she notices some flowers along the path and stops to admire them, pointing out that they're winter daphnes. She explains that these blooms start budding in the fall and toughen out through winter, only to bloom come spring, so that bloom means spring's officially arrived. She then points to another patch, and when she tries to tell him what kind they are, he tells her that they're chickweed. He mentions that boiling chickweed stalks makes a great stomach remedy. Back in his village, it was a go-to cure, especially for a childhood friend of his who loved sweets so much that she'd always end up with stomach hacks. Ofa laughs, saying that girl sounds like a fun one, and he admits he was always dancing to her rhythm. Hearing that, Ofu starts to think there's more to his story than he lets on. He enjoys soba, he stops to admire flowers, he holds on to warm memories from the past. Clearly, he's more than just someone chasing a purpose. She gently tells him that being so locked in on one goal is blinding him to the rest of the world. She asks him to slow down sometimes, take a moment to live in the now. If he does, he's sure he'll see things he's never noticed before. Not long after, they arrive at her house and notice that the lights are still on, so Jinya realizes her dad must have stayed up waiting for her. She then thanks him for walking her home, and as she turns to leave, he asks if she'll teach him more about flowers sometime, but next time preferably while the sun's still out. She smiles and agrees, then heads inside. That's when Mosuk turns off his invisibility and comments that Ofa seems like a good woman. Jinya nearly jumps, completely shocked that Mosuk had been tailing him the whole time. Mosuk dodges the question and walks off, saying he's heading out to keep looking for the slasher. And once again, the night ends with Jinya camping out on the bridge, waiting in silence for the killer to show. A drunk guy then stumbles past Jinya, and right then, the slasher shows up out of nowhere and attacks him. The woman behind them drops to her knees in shock, and that's when Jinya finally gets a good look at the slasher for the first time. It lunges at him, but he blocks the strike and the girl, still in disbelief, starts to panic. Jinya warns her to stay put if she wants to stay alive, then he moves the fight away from her to keep her out of harm's way. But the slasher sees an opening and tries to circle back and go after the girl. Before he can get close, Mosuk jumps in and pulls her to safety while Jinya follows up with a counterattack. Realizing it's completely outmatched, the slasher decides to bail and shoots off into the air to escape. After it's gone, Jinya apologizes to Mosuk for letting it slip away, but Mosuk brushes it off, saying it was tougher than he thought it'd be. Still, he's going to track it to find out where it's hiding. Jinya tells him to be careful and keep his distance, and Mosuk nods, assuring him he has no plans of dying anytime soon. He takes off after it, and once he's gone, the girl behind Jinya asks for a hand getting up. He helps her up and she gives him a look, saying his grumpy attitude really takes her back. She wonders if he still remembers her, and when he looks closer, he realizes it's Natsu. She's happy he still recognizes her, and he points out how much she's changed. It's been 3 years after all, and she's surprised that he hasn't aged a bit. He jokes that he's immune to aging, and she laughs it off like he's messing with her. Curious, he asks what she's doing out here this late, and she explains she was heading home after dropping off a delivery to one of their regular customers. He notes again how different she seems. Her smile looks more natural now, and she tells him that just proves she's not a kid anymore. Right then, Zenji shows up and teases her, saying she's not quite an adult yet, which clearly catches her off guard. He then spots Jinya and instantly jumps to conclusions, asking if the two of them are wrapped up in some kind of romance. Jinya quickly shuts that down, telling him Natsu just got attacked by a serial killer. Zenji then notices the body nearby and totally freaks out. He suggests they call for the authorities, but Natsu says that won't help because this was the work of a demon. Jinya confirms it, saying it's the same demon he's been chasing for a while, and Natsu just got caught in the crossfire. So Zenji then jokes that Jinya really has a habit of surrounding himself with demons, and Natsu turns to ask how he's making a living these days. He told her he was still working as a demon-slaying Ronin, and if she ever wanted to see him again, she could find him at a soba shop in Fukugawa called Kihei. He even offered her a discount if she stopped by. Since her escort was already here, he figured it was time to go, but before parting, she thanked him for saving her life. As Jinya was walking off, Zenji called out one last piece of advice. If Jinya was still looking for demons, he might want to check out Teramachi Temple. The place had been abandoned ever since the head priest passed away, and locals were saying they'd been hearing a woman's voice echoing from inside. Rumors were spreading that something unnatural might be living there. Meanwhile, Mosuk is still tracking the demon through the streets, but he ends up losing it. Just then, a woman's scream cuts through the night, and he rushes toward the sound only to spot the demon carrying someone. It instantly reminds him of his wife Hatsu and the rage she's been holding and finally explodes. He chases the demon all the way to Teramachi Temple, slips inside using his invisibility, and what he sees in there leaves him shaking with fury. The demon is devouring the woman it just kidnapped, swallowing her whole bones and all. Mosuk can't hold himself back anymore. He charges in dead set on ending the thing, convinced it's the same one that murdered Hatsu, but the demon senses him coming and tears into him with its claws, shredding his gut open. Then it calmly goes back to its meal, chewing through the woman's head while Mosuk lies on the ground, bleeding out and wondering if this is how he's going to die, pathetic and empty, without even getting his revenge. Eventually, the demon leaves and not long after, Jinya shows up. He spots Mosuk barely hanging on and kneel beside him. Mosuk manages a weak grin, joking that he really made a mess of himself. Jinya asks if he found the demon and Mosuk confirms it, saying it was here, eating women alive. It's the same monster that took his wife. Jinya is stunned to hear that, especially about the eating part. Then Mosuk makes one final request. He asks Jinya to avenge him and hands him a sword forged in Kodono, saying it'll slice through any demon like butter. Jinya promises to do just that, but in return, he asks Mosuk to lend him his power. Mosuk is relieved and grateful even that he can still help Jinya one last time, even if it's with his dying breath. Jinya then absorbs Mosuk's power, and as he does, he catches a glimpse into his soul. He sees that Mosuk had spent most of his life running from demons, constantly looking over his shoulder. But when he finally settled in this town, he began living like a regular human, and for the first time he found peace. Eventually, he met the woman who would become his wife, and over time, they fell in love. When things got serious, he came clean about his true nature, revealing that he was actually a demon. But instead of running away, she looked him dead in the eye and told him she loved him, so human or demon, it didn't matter to her. After seeing that, Jinya finishes absorbing Mosuk's power and quietly promises to carry out his final wish. Some time passes and we see the demon dragging another woman into its hideout and starts feeding. As it eats, it starts recalling the day it first became self-aware. It had already been born into this grotesque demonic body. From the beginning, it had this instinct, this need to kill men. That urge was the only thing it understood at the time. Since then, it had been searching for something. It didn't know who or what it was looking for, just that it needed to go home. But it didn't even know where home was. The only thing it was sure of was that it couldn't return in its current state, so it kept abducting women. It believed it carried something its body lacked. That's why it devoured them, so it could consume what was missing and finally find a way back. Back in the present, the demon continues its feeding frenzy when suddenly, Jinya shows up. He's surprised the creature would come back here after its lair was exposed. Without hesitation, he attacks using invisibility, slicing off one of its hands in a clean strike. The demon lashes back, but Jinya dodges every blow, keeping just out of reach. It bolts across the temple, trying to go on the offensive, and Jinya admits that its power is kind of a pain to deal with. But this time he is armed with Mosuk's power. He dodges every strike, then drops his invisibility, and lets the demonic aura in his arm flare. He then tells the demon that he is going to end him by using the gift Mosuk can trust it in with. Jinya then charges in, vanishing at the last second, and in one clean motion, takes its head off. The demon is still clinging to life, gasping in pain, and Jinya walks up to it, demanding an answer. He asks why it left Mosuk's wife's body untouched when it devoured every other woman it captured. If it really was the killer Mosuk was hunting, then why didn't it consume her completely? The demon starts crying, saying it needed a body. It couldn't go home without one. Jinya doesn't understand what it's talking about, but he remembers the question the demon asked him earlier if he feasts too. He tells it yes, he does. Except he feeds on demons the same way it fed on women. Now he's going to consume its power. As he absorbs the demon's strength, he realizes its ability is called Dart, a temporary speed burst that lets the user kick through the air and accelerate instantly. It's a solid ability, one he's sure will come in handy. But as he consumes the demon, he ends up seeing into its soul. He sees Hatsu, Mosuk's wife, being violated by two men while they're laughing, before tossing her into the river like trash. As she sinks, her final thoughts are about going home, but she refuses to return in a body that's been defiled. Instead, she searches for another vessel, one that can help her make it back to her husband. That's when she spots a nearby demon, and now it becomes clear to Jinya that this demon was Hatsu, and she just wanted to go home, but that was never going to happen. The demon then fades away, and Jinya quietly leaves the temple. A few days later, back at the soba shop, the owner mentions that Jinya hasn't shown up in a while. He figures it's because he joked about letting him marry his daughter. She reminds her father that he never actually said that, and she also ran into Jinya the other day in Asakusa, and they chatted for a bit. He told her he'd stop by once he was finished with his current job. The owner thinks that the job might already be done because word is that the slasher disappeared and the killings have stopped, but she tells him Jinya mentioned he's still got demons to hunt. Somewhere else, those same two men who violated Hatsu are wandering the streets late at night. They start talking about finding their next victim, laughing about how the last one cried out for her husband as they dragged her under, but then they see Jinya. He steps forward without a word and cuts both of them down in a single strike. Looking down at their bodies, he says nothing, just hopes that Mosuk can finally rest in peace now that Hatsu's been avenged, and he walked away. The scene then shifts to a little girl singing a haunting tune, her voice giving off an eerie, ghost-like atmosphere, and she stops the moment the song ends. After that, we see a samurai approaching Ofu's soba shop, and right at the entrance, he notices someone mistaking him for his brother. As he tries to approach that person, he accidentally crashes into Natsu, who immediately panics upon realizing she just collided with a samurai, apologizing profusely. He doesn't take it personally though, and he apologizes as well, admitting that he should have been paying more attention. The owner of the shop then steps in to reassure Natsu, telling her not to worry, because this man is not Sugumiura. He may be a samurai, but he's well known around here for being gentle and kind-hearted. The next morning, we find Natsugu sitting in the shop again, quietly staring at his soba, but the owner notices that he looks troubled. Curious, the owner asks him what's on his mind, and Natsugu admits that something has been bothering him. The owner offers to hear him up, and Natsugu confides that it's about his older brother. The owner is shocked to hear this, since as far as he knows, Natsugu is the heir to the Miura family, so there shouldn't even be an older brother. But Natsugu is completely sure he once had an older brother, and asks Ofu if she's ever heard of him, revealing that his name was Sadanaga Miura. Ofu says she hasn't, and Natsugu expected as much, since nobody seems to his brother, not even his own family. He started questioning his own sanity, but the owner tries to lighten the mood. Ofu then chimes in, saying she knows someone who might be able to help, and her father adds that the guy's a regular customer too, and he has a habit of poking his nose into all kinds of strange cases. Natsugu wonders aloud if the man might be some kind of diviner or shaman, which makes Ofu and her father burst out laughing. They explain that he's nothing that fancy, just a ronin who for some reason goes around solving bizarre incidents for a price. The owner adds that although he can come across as intimidating, he's actually very kind with some funny quirks. He drops by the shop every single day just to scarf down their soba, and right on cue, Jinya steps into the shop. Jinya places his order as usual, and as he eats, the owner jokes that he must really love their soba if he keeps coming back every day. But Jinya casually replies that it's nothing special, he's just grown attached to the taste. Ofu then comes over to pour Jinya a refill of tea, and he notices that she's gotten a lot better at waitressing. She's happy to hear the compliment, and asks him what progress he's made recently. Jinya tells her all about the different flowers he's been learning about lately. He admits that plants are surprisingly fascinating, and now he can't help but notice all the flowers blooming by the roadside. Hearing that, she smiles and tells him that since they already covered all the seasonal plants, it's time for her to start teaching him about mythological flowers next. Just then, Natsugu interrupts their conversation. Natsugu says that he heard Jinya is someone who deals with rumors of demons and other weird phenomena. Jinya confirms that's true, and Natsuga asks if he could possibly help him solve a mystery. But Jinya refuses, saying that his specialty is limited to demon slaying, and unless demons are involved, he's not going to be much help. Natsuga seems to understand, but leaves looking pretty disappointed. After he's gone, the owner asks Jinya if he could reconsider and lend Natsuga a hand. He explains that Natsuga is looking for his missing big brother, and he's been worried sick about it. Ofu chimes in too, urging Jinya to help. And after a moment, Jinya agrees since he does owe them both a favor. He's still curious though why they care so much, and the owner just laughs and says it's because Natsuga is one of their rare regulars. The scene then shifts to Jinya running into Natsu at a little tea stall, and she's surprised to bump into him there. She orders some tea and a mochi while he sits down nearby. While waiting for her food, she asks him if he likes mochi, and he says he does. Her order soon arrives, and while she's eating, Jinya casually asks her. When she and Zenji are finally getting married, Natsu almost chokes on her food, stunned by the question, and demands to know where that came from. Jinya reminds her that she's 16 now, and that's usually considered marrying age. She admits that's true, but she immediately adds that she could never marry Zenji, since he's always been more like a brother to her. She explains that while her father might have some prospective husbands lined up already, he also told her she's free to choose her own path. From a practical standpoint, she figures her father would probably prefer she married someone like a samurai or a merchant for business reasons. Curious, she then flips the question back at Jinya, asking him what he thinks about marriage. He shrugs and says that nobody would ever want to marry a weird ronin like him, who doesn't even have a stable job. Natsu agrees with a laugh, but she also says that eventually everyone has to settle down at some point. She then asks him how old he is anyway. When he answers that he's 31, she's genuinely surprised to find out he's older than Zenji. She then leans in a little closer, studying him with curiosity, and points out that he doesn't really look that old, asking if he has some secret to staying young. Jinya simply says he has no idea, brushing it off. He then stands up, saying that he has work to get back to. Natsu wonders if it's another demon hunt, and he confirms it is. She questions why he's so fixated on hunting demons, when with his sword skills, he could easily land a much more stable job. But Jinya doesn't have a real answer for her. He admits that even he isn't sure why. Still, if he had to give her a reason, he says it's simply the path he knows how to walk. Natsu smiles, telling him that he usually comes across as so dry and detached that she sometimes wonders if he even cares about anything. But hearing him open up, even just a little, shows her that deep down he's just a regular guy with worries like anyone else. She laughs and tells him to stop speaking to her so formally from now on. With that, she bids him goodbye, playfully warning him not to brood too much or else he's going to end up with permanent wrinkles on his forehead. The scene then shifts over to Natsuga's home, where he is getting ready to leave. His mom sees him off and immediately guesses that he's heading out to search for his brother again, and his silence says it all. She reminds him once more that he's the sole heir to the Miura family and insists he never had an older brother, but Natsu firmly replies that he remembers his brother clearly. She knows he's been wandering the slums and red light districts, chasing after shadows. She begs him to give up the foolish search and start behaving like a proper samurai, one who serves his lord with dignity. But Natsuga remains stubborn and says he'll fulfill his duties, but only after he finds his brother. With that, he excuses himself and walks away, even as she calls after him. As Natsuga gashes off through the streets, he recalls a conversation he once had with his brother. His brother said that it wasn't houses or land that made people, it was people who made homes. His brother also believed in loyalty and dedication, but refused to compromise his own beliefs for the sake of duty. Then Natsuga wonders where his brother could be now. Just then, Jinya appears beside him, asking if he's heading out to continue the search, and Natsuga is caught off guard but relieved to see him. Jinya tells him that he's decided to take a closer look into his situation, although he warns that he can't guarantee they'll find any answers. Natsuga says that's perfectly fine, he's just glad someone believes him. Jinya then immediately gets to the point, asking Natsuga about the events leading up to his brother's disappearance, but they decide to take the conversation somewhere more private before going into the details. The scene then shifts to the two of them seated at the soba shop, and Natsuga can't help but take notice of the katana hanging at Jinya's side. It's clearly no ordinary blade, its craftsmanship is far too refined. Curious, Natsuga remarks on how odd it is for a ronin to carry such a high-quality weapon and wonders aloud whether Jinya might have come from a samurai lineage. Jinya shakes his head, explaining that he didn't. He recounts how he once stayed in a remote mountain village known for its forged bellows, home to blacksmiths who specialized in crafting katanas. While there he served in a role that required him to wield one, and now he serves a similar purpose once more. The blade he carries was authorized by the shogunate, so he has official permission to keep it at his side. Natsuga hazards a guess, asking if Jinya might be from Kodono. Jinya raises an eyebrow, impressed by the accuracy. Natsuga grins, explaining that he suspected it when he saw the design of the scabbard. He admits he's something of a katana enthusiast, and he's read that one hallmark of Kodono blades is their scabbards, unassuming in design but elegant in their subtle craftsmanship. Jinya confirms that this particular blade was once a sacred artifact enshrined in the village. It ended up in his hands due to circumstances he'd rather not get into. Natsuga leans in, intrigued, and asks for the blade's name. Jinya answers that it's called Jirai, and Natsuga lights up the mention of it, speculating that the name might derive from an old phrase tied to warding off evil or purifying spirits, and he asks Jinya if he knows any stories like that. Jinya admits he doesn't, but recalls the village elder once saying the sword had remained spotless for over 100 years. Natsuga is thrilled to hear it, and practically brimming with excitement, asks if Jinya would be willing to draw the sword and show it to him. Jinya politely declines, and Natsuga quickly backs off, apologizing for getting carried away. With that aside, Jinya says it's time they get to the heart of the matter. Natsuga then shares his story, how his older brother suddenly vanished without a trace, and no matter how far he searches, he finds nothing. What's worse is that nobody seems to remember his brother ever existing, not even their own parents. Everyone insists that Natsuga is the Miura family's sole heir. A few people admit the name Saganaga rings a faint bell, but even they eventually insist there must be a mistake. Natsuga has no choice but to accept that he's the only person who still recalls his brother's existence. The shop owner, overhearing the heavy subject, gently cuts in, suggesting that if they're going to discuss something so serious, they might want to move somewhere more private. But Jinya shakes his head and jokingly says that it's fine because this place doesn't get much traffic. But then he adds that it was because Ofu and her father both seemed genuinely worried about Natsuga, and that's why they came to talk here. Jinya then asks Natsuga when exactly his brother vanished, and Natsuga replies that it was near the end of January. He remembers that right before his disappearance, his brother mentioned going to meet a girl. Not long after, Natsuga found some flowers in his brother's room. He couldn't identify what kind they were, but they had a strong lingering scent. The flowers were small, with delicate white petals and a bright yellow center, and it struck him as odd because his brother was never someone who cared for flowers. Since no one else had been in the room besides him, Natsuga figured his brother must have left them there himself. Jinya considers this and asks if he still has the flowers. Natsuga nods, saying that he kept them preserved, thinking they might serve as evidence if anything ever came to light. Hearing that, Jinya asks if he can visit Natsuga's house tomorrow to take a look himself. Natsuga hesitates for a moment, then agrees. The scene then shifts to Jinya, arriving at the soba shop again the next day, and he notices that Natsu is already there. He places an order for soba, and the owner seems amused that Jinya has started calling Natsu so casually. He teases Ofu, saying she might need to step up her game, and she quickly tells her father to stop talking nonsense. Ofu comments that the two seem to be getting along, and Natsu casually replies that it's nothing special. Jinya then asks Ofu how well she knows Natsuga, and she says they aren't particularly close, but they talk now and then when he visits the shop. She's curious why Jinya's asking, and he simply replies that he was just wondering. Ofu says Natsuga has always been respectful in their conversations and comes across as a genuinely kind and sincere man. Natsu realizes they're talking about the samurai she bumped into the other day, and she agrees because she found him to be humble and polite too. The owner chimes in saying Natsuga seems nice and all, but he becomes overly enthusiastic whenever swords are brought up. That reminds him, so he grabs something to show everyone, and it's a kogai. He explains that Natsuga's family serves as vassals to the shogun, so it's expected for them to possess tools like this. But Natsuga once gave him this particular kogai, which is traditionally carried by samurai. The owner adds that Natsuga is completely obsessed with swords, it's practically the motivation behind everything he does. He even recalls overhearing Natsuga's mother scolding him for this obsession, and Jinya asks if he's had any dealings with her. The owner says no, he's only ever caught a glimpse of her, but based on what he's heard, she's quite the fearsome woman. The owner then tries to hand the kogai over to Jinya, who's reluctant to accept it at first since Natsuga gave it as a gift, but the owner insists he has no use for it, and eventually Jinya agrees to take it, deciding he'll hold onto it for now. He enters to Ofu and asks if the flowers Natsuga mentioned the other night were daffodils, and she confirms they were, but Jinya finds it hard to believe since Natsuga described them as being small. Still, he really hopes they're anything but daffodils. We then cut to the same young girl from before and she reflects quietly to herself that the place she's in now used to be her garden of joy, where she spent her childhood, but now she knows she can never return there.